afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast. Lehr with me, your host, Imperial Dana, Master of Instruction, covering off here the Bofors, as I do believe that was what people asked for the most. I mean, it was close between the Bofors and the AC, but I believe, at least last I looked, the Bofors was winning ahead there. So the Bofors, quick fire, 40mm emplacement. A neat little thing then that can be sort of, acquired after having researched it here from the platoon command post. 100 manpower, 15 fuel, then a bit more resources there, sort of get the Bofors itself up, require sappers. Basically tier 2, but you can get it up pretty quickly due to the fact, you can get tier 2 as a British pretty quickly. So what do you get? I mean, you get a pretty mean anti-infantry, anti-light vehicle position, plus they can also work vessels like, well, aircraft. But of course, the thing is to keep in mind, it is an emplacement, it is static, and lastly, what applies to sort of all static things, also applies to the Bofors. That is, it's going to attract a lot of fire. That's a matter of fact. But I've certainly seen some players say, but it needs to be tougher. No, that's not. Problem is, if you do that, people just blob up around it in a nice position. How do I know this? We had a thing called Company Heroes 1. British emplacements there were tough. Guess what happened? Not a parade. Yeah. That was the age of what was known as the Sim Cities, huge complexes of just emplacements soaking up unbelievably amounts of damage. So yeah, no. And of course that means you have to actually put some thought into where you're placing them. And that also means if you're placing it at the very front of your front line, it's going to be the first thing that attracts fire. Same thing with bunkers and so on. If you put it at the front, it's going to be the first thing they'll try to shoot at because it's a big, bad target. I mean, it's the same thing, you don't put your finest jewellery right at your windows, for everybody to see, because what's going to happen? They'll bash in your windows and steal your jewelleries, or whatever other sort of nice, valuable things you might have. And basically, same logic here applies. Which means you have to rather approach it slightly differently. What is an emplacement? It's a static support weapon. Oh, did you say support weapon? Doesn't mean you place it slightly further behind them to support the front line troops. Exactly. And that's the thing, a lot of people pop down and place and think, well, that is my line of defence. No, it isn't. If that's it, you're just going to get blown to bits and pieces. It's part of a defence. It might be a vital piece of defence, but it is not the defence. That should always be kept in mind with any kind of emplacement, bunker, or whatever. It is not the defence. It is a part of the defence. So a bit of theory there anyways. I might make a further video on that. But overall, consider where to place it again, particularly because this one has a neat little ability, in fact all emplacements have, where you sort of either gather a troop or place a forward assembly near to it. It gains access to a suppressive barrage. We can basically deal with most infantry by simply instantly pinning it. Can clear up mortar emplacements if they get too close, anti-tank guns, machine guns, and the likes. It's not super accurate, but can still actually pull it off from time to time. And that's the neat thing about it. Again, you can actually work it as a sort of light artillery piece, supporting your frontline troops when they're under attack. Great stuff. In that sense, it's reasonably, versatile, because again, it can deal with light vehicles, it can deal with light infantry, but again, you want to consider its placement. I mean, again, at the forefront, it's going to take a lot of fire. Slightly further back, then can actually cover retreating troops. Cover there, so if it pushes forward, it's going to cause a slightly different effect. Because there's one thing, having it right at the front line, again, it's going to be what's first targeted. On the other hand, after a prolonged engagement, and then he has to push forward, that might cause a slightly different reaction. That might actually just cause him to pull back instead of have to waste troops and resources on that when he's already worn down by fighting the front line. So, slight difference there. You can also use, of course, cover more vital points, because again, this is going to quite a larger effort to sort of actually bring it down. Because ultimately, again, it's going to become, a problem, and it's going to bring out, of course, you sort of have to make it, if it does that, of course, you want to try set it up in such a way that he might expose some elements, cause a bit tricky to get out to, so I to deal with it. So, some thoughts there as well, but overall, consider its placement, consider, is it the first thing my opponent's going to see? If it is, probably shift it slightly further away, because again, unless, and of course that might be you're actually forcing your opponents who will want to react to it, bring in the counters, and then you bring in something else to then deal with the counters easily, and then don't have to worry about it anymore. That's also an option. Otherwise, you're going to have to do something so force them to bring out something else, and then bring up the Bofors. I mean, again, that strategy thing he had, trying to counter his potential moves. But overall, looking again, for what you get, it's not too bad. In particular, sort of get up in a really good position. And even if counter, it usually is going to require a large amount of resources to actually do it. And if you then get some damage out in the first place, suppress, kill, murder, then that's good. But as a rule of thumb, again, don't place it right at the front line. I mean, for example, here, it's a nice position again. It dominates a nice chunk of the map, but there's another little detail. Nothing covering it. It's going to be the first thing your opponent sees, and it's going to be the first thing he's going to shoot to bits. So again, that's always one of the things you have to consider. Always consider that. Because these things tend to be priority targets. Because again, they're pretty nasty, and you want them gone as soon as possible. Things, also apply to bunkers, certainly apply to, for example, also companies run, with stuff like medic bunkers, medic tents, all attracted up certain amounts of fire because they have an impact on the battlefield. And no matter what, there's not really much you can do about that. Just, try to be clever about your placement, and try to sort of minimize way to either for it to take too much damage, or some way to sort of expose the attackers where you can then sort of strike more easily at him. But of course, you can also then throw other emplacements to support it. A mortar emplacement could work, or of course, you could sort of try to prepare some artillery and support it, maybe deal with the enemy artillery, which is one of the more likely counters to be brought in, obviously. So some thoughts there, but overall, not too bad. But again, very much considered position, and will consider as part of the defense, not the defense. If it is only part of the defense, it's not going to last too long. So always consider it as a part of the defense, and try to think from there on. Hence. Or if you must sort of have it absolutely in its own, try to do it on flanks, try to do it where the opponent isn't moving about much anyway, so again, forces will have to shift a large force out there, which you can then maybe flank and deal with. So, some thoughts there overall covering the Bofors, and again, probably not what everybody wants to hear, but again, I mean, experience from the first company here really tells me, again, this doesn't need to be too tough. Plus, you got brace something, the first stuff had, and again, they can sort of use the sort of time to, cover it up and give you more time to react and deal with the enemy. Other things you can consider, of course, is laying down mines to support it, but wires, so flamethrower units, of course, can't immediately rush it, because that's going to be one thing, and of course, in that sense, but how do you cover it, you might ask? How do I counter it? That is more specifically as an enemy. If you're the Wehrmacht, of course, mortars, but even then there's other options. You can say, for example, smoke it, and then move up some flamethrowers to deal with it. For example, flamethrower half-tech, which of course do damage with time, and then outlast the brakes. I mean, you've got options there. And of course, another thing to consider, brace is basically suppression. If he braces it, he's basically willingly suppress his own weapon, so that way you can also rush up more units than deal with it. There's all these sorts of options and considerations to keep in mind about this weapon, and for that matter other emplacements. But overall, again, consider it as part of a larger defense, and you will generally, I think, do quite alright. Consider it as the defense, and it will fail because it can never be that, and it never should be, because that's only going to lead to really, really bad things. Again, see Company of Heroes, SimCities, see very, very, very bad. So I think that sort of covers it. Again, above us, this is a bit more of a tricky thing to sort of cover, but I think that's sort of rather the best I can sort of give it when it comes down to this sort of little unit. All in all. Again, potent, but again also vulnerable to its static diffs. Again, that requires you to think things through a bit further and consider what you actually want out of it and want to cover. I mean, you can't just plop one down and expect to do all the work for it, because that's only going to end up poorly. So keep that in mind, and you should generally, I think, do alright with your Bofors. And again, try as much as possible to get something like that suppressing barrels, which I think is also one of the key elements, because again, it's basically free suppressive artillery, which can really use sort of deal with enemy infantry, support weapons, and the like. So try to also do that, and even then consider maybe using just like that, maybe placing it up close to another building so enemy artillery can't easily hit it, and just use it that to suppress. Option there anyways. So thank you all for joining in. Hopefully this has been educational. Hopefully this has been a bit of appreciation of the Bofors and how to deal with it. If it did, feel free to like the video, share it with friends, and so on. Subscribe to my channel, and all that stuff. So thank you all for joining in, and hope to see you another time where we'll probably be covering the AC, if we can find sort of a decent video of that. So thank you all, and see you to another time. Bye.